Hello, Stadio students, and welcome back to your next Teaching Life Orientation in the FET phase lecture. Right, just to make sure again that you're in the right space, the module is called TLOF701, and this is the second of 3 video lectures on promoting healthy individuals, schools, and communities in South Africa. And this specific lecture will focus on healthy living, and you will find this in Null, but it's basically the chapter was written by Hay, and it will be on page 227 to 241. In this lecture, of course, I'm going to address the theme, which is health, but I will also be sharing some very useful resources and documents to assist you in the teaching of life orientation to promote healthy community, schools, and learners in the FET phase, and that is also the title or the broad topic of your assignment 2, your essay. So yeah, this should be very helpful to you in terms of completing assignment 2, which is an individual assignment. Just briefly again, always good to remind ourselves of what is happening. We can see that your assignment 1 is now due on the 16th of May, and to get a better overview and focus on that, you can look at the lecture in week 5. Also, your new revised due dates is available under week 7 and in a briefing that I've put there for you, and it will take you through all the new due dates. You will see that I've actually used a little correct ticks there in your under that column under your group task, and basically indicating that that part is completed now. So what you have done, or what you're going to hand in on the 16th of May, is a lesson narrative, rationale, and reflective evaluation, like we've been discussing. So I'm looking forward to marking all of those. I see some groups have already uploaded their assignment using the template, and yeah, so well done for keeping up. The rest of us, if you haven't done so yet, time is running out. We have to be quick about that. You will see that that assignment contributes 20% to your final mark, and that your assignment 2, which will be due on the 23rd of May, will contribute 25% to your final mark. And also be reminded that your involvement trackers that you've been working on steadily for every week, that will count or contribute 15% to your final mark. So up to so far, there's quite a significant number of opportunities, especially by the 23rd of May. You're going to have more than 50% of the marks completed. I have already shared this with you in a briefing, but I'm going to just scroll down these dates for you real quick as a reminder. There it is, your group work closing date is Saturday the 16th of May. It'll close at midnight. Your assignment 2 is your essay on health. Your closing date is 23rd of May. So note that these two dates are actually quite close to one another, and so you don't want to leave your essay just for 1 week. You want to actually start this week already. Your online test will be available on Friday and Saturday, 5 and 6 of June. It opens on 6 o'clock in the evening on the Friday, and it'll close again 6 o'clock in the evening on the Saturday. And that specific test will be on Unit 1 and 2, and it will be with a focus on short questions. Your online test 2 is a little bit later. It's on Friday and Saturday, the 19th and 20th of June. Obviously opening on the 19th, like I've just explained. And in this case, it'll be on Unit 1, 2, and 3, and it will also incorporate longer questions. Basically, the idea there would be what one might call a take-home test, where you download, you complete the test, and you upload it again. And week 14, that's the last week in our adapted program now because of the time we've lost. There will be a summative video, and there will be a last involvement tracker for you to complete after that summative video. And it will probably take the form of just some true and false and multiple choice questions. All right, so I'm looking forward to seeing you all connect and interact on our virtual learning platform, ECI. So let's get into today's lecture a little bit more, a little bit deeper. And we can say that the question that we're working on is how can we facilitate, mediate, and support our FET learners to make healthier choices and live a healthy life. So as LO teachers, that's something we need to ask ourselves constantly. And even if you think back to the lectures I've done previously, and even the introduction to this module, I have said that ultimately life orientation is really about healthy and effective growth and development, or facilitating healthy and effective growth and development of our FET learners. So yeah, of course, exploring this particular question will also be what we are exploring in our essay. Right, to help us understand this topic much better, and also to help you out in terms of getting some resources for your writing of your essay, we can take a look at the URLs, the links that I've placed here on the slide for you. So you can pause the slide and take a closer look at the websites. And especially, I think the bottom one there in light blue, Skills for Health, published by the World Health Organization, actually a number of organizations, will definitely help you to understand this idea of life skills and health much better. I have placed a link there for you under week 6, and so please go back and take a look at that if you haven't downloaded that document yet. It will be very helpful in terms of your essay writing, but also some have already taken a look at it. I could see in the ones that I've looked at for assessment that they definitely have taken a look at that document as well as part of their lesson rationale that they had to write up. All right, so we can also take a look at this website of UNICEF, United Nations Children's Emergency Fund. And this is also explaining a UN special program devoted to aiding efforts to improve the health, nutrition, education, and general welfare of children. And there is the upper left-hand corner. You can see the link that can take you there. At the bottom there, you can also see various documents that you can download from this website. And then that particular paragraph asks some very, very interesting questions under the introduction that I thought would really get your mind going in terms of your essay and your essay writing. So yeah, take a look at that. And here is just a quick screen grab of how that Skills for Health document looks. And I'm just pointing out a few things to you here. So understanding skill-based health education and life skills. So there is definitely already a definition and descriptions for you that you can take a look at. Of course, with the ultimate aim of for you to develop your skills as a life orientation teacher, life orientation facilitator and mediator, like we've been discussing. Also in terms of theories, theories and principles supporting skill-based health education. And if you studied psychology, you will recognize quite a number of these, and especially when you read them and you look at the references, you will see people like Albert Bandura and a whole host of psychological theories that you need to take a look at. I can just quickly, my eyes catching this resilience theory, for instance. A little bit later at the end of this lecture, I'll be speaking about resilience. So you can find some really good references and also descriptions and definitions about resilience theory. Right, what's also really important is the evaluation of the evidence and lessons learned. So factors actually that contribute to effective programs and factors that contribute to ineffective programs or skill-based health programs, which I think is also very important. So it shares some research about basically what works and what doesn't work and what works really well. And also actually in terms of preparation for our Unit 3, we will be taking a much closer look at some theories around the teaching of life orientation and basically how it should be done. Some philosophies, one might argue as well. So yeah, take a look at this document, especially I think page 1 to page 30 for this document. It's actually a much longer document, but page 1 to page 30 will really give you a lot of good information that you can use in your essay, and that I think will make a big contribution to your understanding of the teaching of life orientation. Right, another website, I shared the UNICEF website a little bit earlier, but now I want to point us to the World Health Organization's website, and specifically the information series on school health. And once again, there's some very good documents for you to download there. And of course, the link or the URL is right at the top there. School youth health resources information series. So take a look at that. All right, so I wanted to take another look at the slide I've shared before in the previous lecture on communicable diseases versus non-communicable diseases. And we know that the COVID-19 is the latest sort of diseases in a range of diseases that are called communicable diseases. So these diseases are also known as infectious diseases or transmissible diseases. And they result from infection or the presence or growth of a pathogenic biological agent, basically, commonly known as germs, or virus, really. So we've also looked at non-communicable diseases, and as course, we said they are caused by a combination of genetic and physiological, as well as important lifestyle and environmental factors, or just simply called risk factors. Of course, what is really interesting about the whole coronavirus is this idea of curbing the rate of infection, and that really these risk factors that are normally associated strongly with non-communicable diseases are now also associated with the risk of contracting the communicable disease. So most notably, of course, we speak about social distancing, or of course, because social interaction and contact would then be promoting of this pathogenic biological agent, called COVID-19. And so a lot of the transfer of this disease, we can say the communication of this infectious disease then happens through social interaction, because we come in contact with the bodily fluids, most notably saliva, actually, from a patient that might be infected. So hence the need for social distancing and the whole lockdown of the economy and the whole lockdown in general that happens. So this is just something very interesting. I thought I'll point out to you guys that this is although we have clear non-communicable diseases and communicable diseases, sometimes these risk factors actually bridge across both. And really, the risk factors are related to behaviors, to actually behaviors that would endanger you, or behaviors that will actually help or prevent the spread of the disease. For instance, we can look at this one, excessive use of alcohol. So, while normally it would be just quite amusing observing a person that are inebriated, and then, possibly we might try and help the person, now actually becomes quite dangerous, because I don't know if you've ever tried to reason with somebody like that, but they obviously, their judgment is impaired, and they will not make good choices in terms of social distancing and behavior that can actually expose themselves and other people. So, with a sort of a twist of fate, so to speak, actually the excessive use of alcohol cannot be encouraged, or basically just the use of alcohol doesn't have to be excessive, cannot be encouraged. And normally alcohol is also, or the use of alcohol is a social activity. It's part of basically the definition of alcoholism, that you would have to sit by yourself and take a drink or more. So basically that basically describes the problem with alcohol and alcohol abuse. Okay. Right, we also took a look the previous time at one where Nell describes a health promoting school. All right, and why a school would actually take some time to deal with this. Okay, because first of all, it impacts directly on learner health. Okay, and second of all, learner health would impact effective learning. So those are two really good reasons why a school needs to be a health promoting school. And then especially this is now being highlighted by the whole COVID-19 lockdown, and then of course will be highlighted even more as we go towards reopening the schools, because now the schools have a responsibility, there it is, to minimize the health threats in the school, or the health hazards. And of course, one of those very difficult things to do is now to help learners to regulate themselves, and to have the school rules basically. So learners have social distancing, also the number of learners per class, the wearing of masks. So we can say, if we go to the bottom right here, and look at the characteristics of a health promoting school, it's really about building capacity as a health setting. Has now become really important. I mean, it always has been, but now in the light of the virus, it becomes crucial, right? So provision of accurate and relevant health information is going to be really important when teachers and learners return to classrooms, and to equip learners with skills, knowledge, attitudes. Yeah, because maybe we don't want to wear a mask. It's not really that comfortable, honestly, to wear it for 5-6 hours on end, which is also another reason to change the structure of schooling. Yeah, in many ways. That is difficult to predict at this point. But basically to enhance well-being, and obviously not to slow the spread of the virus and not expose children. It's also why the youngest children will go back to school last. And then ultimately it's about this changing the health behavior of the individuals is key. All right, so let's take another look at that. So we can define a health promoting school, and this is by the World Health Organization. A health promoting school can be characterized as a school constantly strengthening its capacity as a healthy setting for living, learning, and working. Right, and there's another little link for you to where you can find more information. The school and youth health Initiative and the Global School Health Initiative. I thought it would be also really good to take another look at this definition by Bronfenbrenner and his what he calls bioecological perspective. So it's how the ecology influences, in this case, biology. So in the case of COVID-19, it's really the ecology is the whole context in which the virus spreads, the social context. And so Bronfenbrenner then makes the statement that human beings are active producers of their own development. And so I thought it would be interesting for you to engage with a bit of a question here. So I'm going to share the question with you, and then I'm going to ask you to pause this video for a couple of minutes and think about that. And possibly even, I think it would be preferable if you grab a pen or if you have a cell phone and you do a bit of writing on your notes, or even on your PC, you can type up a paragraph or two. So I'm asking you to think of the current health challenges related to the COVID-19 virus, and there are many, and then ask yourself the following question and see if you can come up with a good answer to this. And the question is, how does our behaviors related to our life skills, knowledge, values, and attitudes and beliefs influence the results and long-term outcomes we might produce? So how does our behaviors related to our life skills, knowledge, values, attitudes, and beliefs influence the results and long-term outcomes we might produce? Specifically, think of this in the context of the COVID-19 virus. Okay. And of course, it's all about the SCAV, or the skills, knowledge, values, and attitudes. And I've also, in a previous lecture, I've added beliefs to that mix, beliefs in the most general sense. If you think back to that lecture I did on rational emotive behavioral theory, that is that's a little hint for you. Okay, so you can pause the video here and stop and think a little bit. Right, so I really hope you're taking a few moments to write, 3 to 5 minutes, see if you can come up with a paragraph. Of course, the idea is here to get some ideas and inspiration for your essay. All right, so I hope that was a helpful exercise, engaging with a question. Hopefully you did some writing. Yeah, if you didn't feel like writing, hopefully you paused a few moments and you thought through that question. Okay, so I'm gonna, for the rest of this lecture, obviously share some of the possible answers or ideas that can go into your thinking. So we can say a health promoting school will focus on caring for oneself and others. So it's about having a caring attitude, teachers in general having a caring attitude, the school having a caring attitude, and of course that needs to show in how the school will now respond to this crisis. So making healthy decisions and taking control over life circumstances, creating contributions that are conducive to health, right, through policies. So possibly the COVID-19 procedures will be written into school health policies, and basically into the Department of Education will generate different policies for schools to comply with, the services that we provide them, and then ultimately the physical and social conditions at the school that needs to be generally healthy. But like I said, this whole idea of deep cleaning, especially clean and healthy in the context of COVID-19. So it's about building capacities for peace, shelter, education, food, income, stable ecosystem, equality, social justice, sustainable development. So the whole range of sort of social justice concepts there. And then preventing leading causes of death, disease, and disability. And there's a number of them. And once again, I have to point out COVID-19 here. I wanted us to focus as well then on this last bit here in yellow indicated. So it's about influencing health-related behaviors. So this whole idea of skill-based health education that I shared earlier is about developing knowledge, beliefs, skills, attitudes, and values. And just to sort of make that point, because one might argue traditionally maybe this isn't the role of teachers and schools, which is probably not 100% accurate either, but definitely there's been a shift and more of an emphasis in the modern world on this. So we can say from a behaviorist perspective, learning has not happened if there is no observable change in behavior. So basically we can say if we can have knowledge, we can have a good attitude, but if there's no change in the doing, in the behavior, it's doubtful whether true learning has happened. And especially we know this from a behaviorist perspective on learning. And then if we look at just general life skills, because although health is definitely a part of it, sometimes we don't think of it like that. So, in general, we can say life skills are abilities for adaptive and positive behavior that enable individuals to deal effectively with the demands and challenges of everyday life. So that's a far more general statement. But when it comes to health, and specifically developing life skills for health, we can say skills-based health education is an approach to creating or maintaining healthy lifestyles and conditions through the development of knowledge, attitudes, and especially skills. All right, and so how do we do this? According to Skills for Health, and this you can find on page 3, a couple of definitions that I think is very, very helpful. It's about learning experiences, and then specifically using participatory methods. So these two ideas relate very strongly to the idea of experiential learning and dialogical learning, which we will be handling in Unit 3. So I'm just pointing out this sort of connection between these important ideas and definitions to you. That really this, although we can identify and talk about this separately, it's really closely connected to the whole idea of life skills or life orientation teaching in general, or the facilitation of the development of life skills we might speak about in the FET phase. All right, so I'm going to sort of just focus here or take you through ideas, important ideas in chapter 14 of NEL, and you can find it on page 227. Obviously, still dealing with that central question of ours about how do we facilitate healthy development, or we might even say health development in the FET phase. So this chapter was written by a guy called Hay. So Hay argues that learners should be educated in the life orientation classroom to live a healthy and balanced life. And then the purpose of that is interesting, because it's the same that you would find in NEL chapter 2, if memory serves, is to overcome social adversities prevalent in the South African environment. Now, although COVID-19 is now a worldwide phenomenon, it takes on its own character and specific challenges in the South African context. So he says, healthy living has become a critical slogan to try and steer South Africans away from the abyss of physical and mental ill health. All right, so, and I have my little diagram that I drew for you here, just those three very important factors, poor physical health, poor mental health, poor living conditions that we would find in a large portion of South African society. And this would actually present a particular challenge in general. Always, COVID-19 or no COVID-19, we had these challenges already. But now adding the COVID-19 to the mix, which is obviously to do with poor physical health, it actually enhances the importance of working on these aspects even more. Right, so then Hay describes healthy living. What is healthy living? So it's one thing to say we should live a healthy life, but what exactly are we talking about? And he's got some very important concepts and ideas that I'll be taking you through in the next few slides. So at the most basic level is where Hay starts. He says to live a healthy life and not be guilty of engaging in unhealthy habits. So that's probably the most basic way of saying this and speaking about this. But then he elaborates on that, and he uses the work of Matushka and Christiansen, 2011 publication, an article of them. So he says they describe the key concepts of health as lifestyle and balance. And we are quite familiar with this concept actually of a balanced lifestyle, having a balanced lifestyle. So what does that really mean? This research actually speaks very interesting about this. I like this in bright blue highlighted here for you. It says satisfying, it's a satisfying pattern of daily occupation that is healthful, meaningful, and sustainable to an individual within the context of his or her current circumstances. So this idea of a satisfying pattern, a pattern of living, okay? And then he continues to say that these patterns must consist of a range of activities. So how do we recognize these patterns? We can see them in the way that they will enable people to do certain things. So we can say it can be an enabling pattern of living, is what I want to speak about. An enabling instead of a disabling pattern of living. You know, a pattern of living that will enable you to live healthily, or a pattern of living that will disable you. And we can just think here of various forms of substance abuse that actually will severely affect us. And so what we need to see here, that this pattern consists of a range of activities. Okay, so these activities must meet basic human needs. Generally speaking, people can just say, you know, having a job would do this in the modern world for you. So if you are employed, you know, you will earn money, a salary, and you can actually fulfill your most basic human needs. If you lose your job, that becomes a challenge and a problem to live this healthy, enabling pattern. And therefore, we can say the possibility of disease is increased, either at a mental, psychological level, or at a physical level. Then, as part of that, having a rewarding and a satisfying, we can say affirming relationships. That's an important part of it as well. People must feel engaged, challenged, and competent, create meaning and positive personal identity. And there I want you to really think of yourself as a PGCE student here. So, you know, I have this little phrase there. I say, I see myself as. How do you see yourself? You know, hopefully as an aspiring teacher, you are in the process of becoming FET, life orientation teacher. And what you've done is you've organized and created time and energy, and probably spend a bit of money as well, to meet important personal goals. So it's an important personal goal for you to become this FET, life orientation teacher. And it's part of your evolving and developing identity. And sometimes we might even refer to this as your role identity. You are expanding your role identity to be not only a learner, but actually now a teacher, which obviously is related, because all teachers need to learn. And actually, coincidentally, teaching is a nice way of learning as well. That's why we get students and learners to present in class, because they actually take the role of the teacher, but it helps them in the learning. All right, so there's an important link there. But the idea here being that creating meaning and a positive personal identity. You know, it's even back to the idea of the spiritual development. Okay. Right, so a very interesting model shared by Hay in Null is this one he calls the biopsychosocial-spiritual model. So immediately this took me back to thinking about my very, very basic model I shared right in the beginning about thinking, feeling, and doing, and that little triangle, if you can remember. Or we can speak about the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domains. But he's got a slightly more elaborate scientific model here. That's, although not too difficult, I think it's pretty straightforward. And it's a model for health and health development. So when thinking about health, and specifically in this case, learner health or facilitating learner health, we can look at the biological domain, we can look at the psychological domain, we can look at the social domain, and we can look at the spiritual domain. And his key concept around these four aspects is really balance, which we will look at in the next slide. But for now, let's look at the biological domain. That's about the physical health. And in a more general ways, we can speak about movement and exercise, healthy eating habits. Those are the two most important aspects that go into the biological domain. And of course, there are many related ideas and concepts to that. And you're going to have to go read that chapter to go and acquaint yourself with those. The psychological domain is actually squarely where we are focused as life orientation teachers. Of course, we cut across many of these if you look at our topics and outcomes, but I would argue that the psychological domain actually features quite strongly in the life orientation classroom, and it needs to, because it's about mental health and life skills, so according to Null. So you can just, if you remember, maybe you've read the first part of your chapter 12 in Null, unpacking what life skills are, and basically the whole of the life skills by Van Heerden Pieterse, my life skills, my journey, my destiny. That whole work basically defines a range of broad range of life skills that one can work on and one can develop. And of course, if it can be learned, it can be facilitated, or if it can be facilitated, it can be learned. So the idea of sharing that resource with you really comes to the fore here. And it's part of the psychological domain of the learner. And then closely related to that is, we can say, is the social domain. Social health, relationships, and relationship skills. Suffice it just to say that it's closely related to this idea of mental health. And then the final one that is actually for sometimes a very sensitive area and should be actually addressed with a lot of empathy and understanding and openness as well. That's also a value, to be open to other perspectives, other ways of living, other ways of being, is spiritual health. And we can even speak about spiritual skills here. Being acquainted with scriptures of whatever kind, reading, generally speaking, but also specifically the scripture reading, prayers, meditation, and I guess the list will go on and on here depending on what religious perspective you come from. So, but also the point here is really that there is a spiritual domain that should not be neglected, and that sometimes even according to the South African Constitution, we can actually have education that really caters and focuses for various religions. Okay, so as shared in the previous slide, I want us to take a look at some key aspects of this model. And the first one there is prevention. So basically we can encapsulate that by saying, prevention is better than cure, or we can say that it's a proactive approach that this model takes to dealing with disease. So it's not really about fixing or helping after the fact, although that might be possible. The focus really is on prevention, to prevent people from disease or unhealthy patterns of living to begin with. And so it's also about unhealthy habits, or unhealthy habits versus healthy habits. It's about relaxation and balance being the key aspect in this model. Right, so we can look at the first one there, the biological domain, and there it's really about neglect or decay. So stuff like regular exercise and healthy eating will actually help your body not to be neglected or to decay, because we know even aging is to a large extent prevented if you can stay healthy. So your body and your cells will age, but it will actually be slower, and you'll be more healthy if you can have a regular exercise and a healthy, balanced diet. And so that's at a biological level that we can already make a prevention there and have healthy habits. Okay, at a psychological level, which we can say is the mind, it's really about, so poor habits, the unhealthy habits would be confusion or impact of negative emotions, or indulging, we might even say, in negative emotions. So whilst negative emotions should be experienced, it's actually, and acknowledged, definitely, but also it's about having a healthy balance between the positive and the negative. And so positive emotions, rational thinking, and functional behaviors, it's really what the psychological domain is about, and bringing those in balance, and not always and overly focusing on negative emotions. Or if negative emotions do arise, it's about acknowledging the impact that it's having, and then of course moving beyond that negative impact of emotions. Aggression would be an interesting one there to look at, because aggression can have a positive connotation as well as a very, very unfortunately a negative connotation that we have with aggression. Okay. And then social, it's all about connection. So poor relationships, conflict, and I've just mentioned that negative aggression, negative forms of aggression, obviously hurting yourself or hurting others, is a negative expression of aggression, linked to obviously things like frustration, which can also obviously be a problem in this period of lockdown, and this idea of social connection or poor relationships. Yeah, and in development and specifically developmental psychology, it's really about this development trajectory and the balance between dependence, independence, and interdependent people. So that's also an idea that was shared by Stephen R. Covey in his famous work about 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That I can really recommend you engaging with that resource. You might enjoy reading that if you into life skills and life skills development. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. And he speaks a lot, even if you Google him on YouTube, you will see him speak a lot about dependence and independence, and then ultimately, according to him, the mature attitude would be an attitude of interdependence. Okay, so healthy connections between people, poor versus good relationships. And then there it is again, the idea of a spiritual or spirit, and the idea of a lack of meaning and purposelessness. So if you don't have a purpose, if you don't have a focus, you don't have any real life goals or drive, that also might point to a lack of spirituality. Sometimes some philosophers even speak about self-transcendence, meaning that you are unselfish, and where people with a lack of spirituality might actually display quite a bit of selfish behavior. So if you just think of the basic premises of all the big religions, sometimes referred to as the golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated, then it's really about altruistic or unselfish giving of oneself. And that, of course, then relates to the will to having a meaning and a purpose to one's life. So I think I'm unpacking this a little bit deeper with you guys because I happen to think that this is a very important aspect of being a teacher. But you will make your own mind up about that, I'm sure. Okay. And then, of course, so these dimensions then relate to this key aspects of the model, the prevention of this idea of prevention, unhealthy versus healthy habits, relaxation, and balance. And really, ultimately, like I said, the key concept here is balance. So we can speak of a body-mind connection and spirit balance. So supporting learners to keep their balance is the way I want to phrase this, is basically an important part. And if you can do this, that means that you are facilitating healthy and effective development. You can support learners to keep their balance between these various aspects. Okay, so as a second last slide, I thought we will take another look at this idea or this definition by Corsini on disease. And because if we're going to speak about disease prevention, then it's very important to understand what disease really is. So Corsini actually refers to, in his Dictionary of Psychology, it refers to a disease being a pathological process marked by a characteristic set of symptoms and dysfunctions, or both, which may affect the entire body or part of the body. Right, and the mind is obviously part of the body, so if it affects the mind, then it would be, this idea of a mental disease. Right, so I thought, so going from that, I'm stating here quite directly, and I guess I'm in a way nailing my collars to the mast here a little bit, saying that schools, and specifically in the allo classroom via the allo teacher, plays an important part in proactively addressing and improving pathological and dysfunctional processes and symptoms. And we have to keep in mind that these processes might lead to disease or severe and negative symptoms, or I'm even tempted to call them outcomes for learners in the short, medium, or long term. So that is really what we're trying to do here in terms of building healthy individuals, building a healthy school, and on top of that, if you have healthy schools and healthy learners leaving school, ultimately a healthy society. So I just thought I'll share this last little bit with you. Then two more ideas to finish off with. This is basically the last slide. Is this idea of support for learners by building on positive psychology and resilience. So, although we can say these are opinions or based on my experiences, based on the literature that you've been reading in NEL, there's also a broader whole body of literature around this under the idea of positive psychology. So if you just Google or you do a wiki on positive psychology, you will find a lot of research that was done on this, specifically by Martin Seligman. So if you've studied psychology before, I'm sure you will be quite familiar with this idea of positive psychology. And positive psychology emphasizes the intrinsic strengths, assets, and resources, and positive constructive intrapsychic domains. So basically this idea of the intrapsychic skills, knowledge, attitudes, values, and even beliefs of the individual. And then that can lead to the outcomes of flourishing and thriving. So these are key concepts within the positive psychology movement. You know, a lot of research on that in the last possibly 20 years or more. So flourishing and thriving. And then a key concept that we've also encountered before, and we see it a lot in life skills and life skills facilitation, is this idea of resilience. Resilience. So Everson and TLOF, they define resilience as the adaptation needed to cope skillfully with demanding circumstances, coping in the face of difficulties so that one remains functional and enjoys life. So basically, yeah, this is me saying to you that I hope that you and your family in this time of lockdown and even coming out of lockdown, I hope that you can cope skillfully with demanding circumstances we are all under. And there's been a lot of changes to adapt to. So stay safe and stay healthy. And I will see you in the next lecture. Thank you.